Today we are making Shchi. It's a Russian sauerkraut soup. So I'm starting by placing 4 cups of sauerkraut in a small Dutch oven. You could do it in a soup pot as well, probably. I'm going to add 1 cup of beef broth. Now what I did for the beef broth, I took some beef ribs and I just cooked them in water with a little bit of salt for about 2 hours on a medium-low flame. I skimmed off the top when it foamed up periodically, and you could add an onion or some carrot if you want. You don't have to. It could add flavor to it. And now I'm going to add 2 heaping tablespoons of tomato paste, and I'm just going to give it a stir, a quick stir, and then I'm going to cover it up and let it cook on a medium-low flame. I forgot to mention that you should drain your sauerkraut before you put it in your pot to cook. Just making sure that I was clear about that. So here is that beef broth that I was telling you about, and I've placed about 4 cups of cut up potatoes, cubed up potatoes. You can cut them up any size that you like. You can do more or less potato depending on, your preference. I just want to show you what the beef ribs looked like. They were cut up into pieces like this, and I had about 10 or 12 of them. It's also up to you whether you use beef. You could do this with chicken. You can make this vegetarian. You can use water or you can use vegetable stock. I chose to do it with beef today. So what I did was I cooked the broth ahead of time, and then I removed the meat. I strained the broth and I cooled off the broth. It makes skimming off the fat much easier, so when it chills you can take off that layer of fat so you get a leaner broth. And it makes the cutting up of the beef into little bite-sized pieces easier. So I've cut up some beef here, and we're going to put that in the soup a little bit later. So you're going to have your potatoes cooking on a medium-high flame, and then I'll show you the next step. And now, as always, we're going to caramelize some onions. I have 4 cups, well, 2 large onions. I'm sorry, I think it's 2 cups, but it was 2 large onions that I diced up. And I heated up some oil in my pan, and I'm just going to cook this until they slightly start to caramelize. So once my onions were caramelized, I added 3 shredded carrots, and I'm cooking this until the carrots get a little bit browned and soft. Now I added some more cabbage and some more tomato paste in the back there because it looked like it was a little too scant for me. I'm not sure if I'm going to add all of it. I think I want a thicker soup, so I'm just going to add it into the soup and stop when I feel like it's thick enough, and I'll let you know how much of it I use. So I ended up using all of the sauerkraut, and I want to show you how thick this soup is. Now some people don't like their soup that thick, so then you would use less, maybe 6 cups, but I used a total of 8 cups of sauerkraut. It's a big giant pot. I don't know if you can see. So if you want to make less, make less. If you don't want it to stick, use less sauerkraut. And I'll show you the next step. So the carrots have gotten nice and soft, and I'm going to add this mixture, the carrot and onions, to the soup. So now in the same pan that I had the onions and carrots in, I put 2 tablespoons of butter. And I'm going to melt that. I'm going to use 2 tablespoons, approximately, of Wondra flour. You could use regular flour. I just prefer Wondra. I don't know if you can see it here. There. Because it doesn't form lumps. It dissolves smoother. It's also great for making gravy. So I'm just going to cook this a little bit, just to get rid of that raw flour taste. And then I'm going to add some of my soup in here. You can also reserve some stock or broth and use that if you have some extra. This really won't take long. So now that you see a little bit of browning and you got rid of that white raw flour taste, I'm going to add the soup. And you want to be careful of the steam. It's very hot. And you want to whisk it quickly. And then I'm going to add this to my soup. So I'm going to add 2 small bay leaves and some black peppercorns to taste to my soup. You can fish the bay leaves out and the peppercorns. I don't mind the peppercorns. If it really bothers you, you can make a little sachet using some cheesecloth so it's not floating around in your soup. Now I'm going to add some salt and some fresh cracked black pepper to taste. So once your soup is ready at the very end, you can turn it off. Right before you turn it off, you can add some crushed garlic. And that's to taste. I added about 3 large cloves. I love garlic. And then I'm going to add some cut up fresh dill and some fresh parsley. And I'm going to stir that in. I also want to add that some people like to cook it with barley. Some people make this soup by adding a little bit of oatmeal to it. Some people like to add mushrooms, especially if it's vegetarian. It's really up to you whether you want to add those ingredients. If you were to add the barley, I'd probably start cooking it with the broth first, and then I'd add the potatoes because I think the broccoli would take longer. Well, depending on how large you cut your potato pieces. And the mushrooms, I think I would saute them a little bit before adding them to the soup. Now here is our soup all plated up with that quintessential dollop of sour cream. I hope you enjoy.